Join us now to build the universal currency we've been waiting for.
Back, and I'm giving mic to Nicholas, and we're about to start. MakerDao, the stage is yours.
Awesome, thank you so much. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is kind of how DAI is going to evolve. And to do that, you really need to understand the basics. And so this may be review, like the first couple minutes may be review for a couple of you, but I promise it's important because otherwise the stuff at the end won't make any sense. So for those of you who don't know us, we make a stablecoin. Looks like that thing up there. It's called DAI, and it's a cryptocurrency that's pegged to the US dollar. And so the one technical jargon thing that you need to understand if you're going to understand Maker and you're going to understand DAI is this thing called a CDP. So a CDP is a collateralized debt position, and essentially it's just a smart contract that acts as your own bank. And so you lock up some kind of valuable assets into that smart contract, and now you can borrow DAI against that collateral. So here you see kind of there's $300 worth of collateral kind of locked in this contract, and this person borrowed $185 worth of DAI. And the important thing to note here is that there is more collateral than there is DAI. Like, that is key. So this position is over collateralized, and it's part of what gives people faith that DAI is worth $1 because they know that there is more than $1 worth of value backing it. Okay, so how does this thing actually remain stable? I've kind of heard Maker kind of described as a Ruby Goldberg machine before, and I can see how some people may think that because there's a lot of moving pieces, but I think if you break it down, it's actually quite simple and intuitive. So it all kind of starts with a promise, right? So I told you that one of these intrinsic axioms of CDPs is that they need to be over collateralized, right? And if the value of the collateral starts to drop, right, they get liquidated in essence, right? So the collateral gets auctioned off in order to recover the debt. And so that allows us to maintain this promise that DAI is over collateralized, that there is more than $1 worth of value backing this DAI. So when we talk about stability and these like fluctuations around the peg, right? DAI has, I'm sure you've seen the headlines, DAI has broken the peg. What are we really talking about? What are we trying to optimize for? So our goal here is to balance the demand for creating DAI with the demand for holding DAI. So every time you see some kind of peg imbalance, it's due to these two things not being in flux, right? There's too many people who want to leverage up on ETH, so there's an oversaturation of DAI supply in the market, right? And now the peg is dropping. Or, the price of ETH is falling, everybody wants to hedge and get out of ETH, people are buying up stable coins, but there's not enough supply in the market, there's not enough liquidity, right, relative to the demand for holding DAI, and now the price rises above the peg. So we really have to deal with these imbalances in different ways. So the primary mechanism is incentives, right? So how do you craft incentives in the market so the peg becomes self-reinforcing? How do you incentivize supply expansion? How do you incentivize supply contraction? And so on the micro scale, when we look at kind of smaller imbalances, effectively arbitrage takes over, right? So if DAI is trading at $1.03, right, anyone can go lock up some DAI and now sell that DAI at $1.03, knowing that at some short-term point in the future, DAI will return to the dollar peg, and they've now closed that 3-cent kind of arbitrage spread, and they basically profited off of that, right? So if DAI is ever trading above the peg, right, people doing this arbitrage on loop, on loop, on loop, on loop, right, are closing the spread until the peg is returned. Similarly, if DAI is trading slightly underneath $1, every DAI out there has been created through a loan. So there are constantly open loan positions that their owners are looking to pay off. And if you can pay back your loan at, you know, pennies on the dollar, so to speak, right? If you can pay back your loan at 95 cents to the dollar, 97 cents to the dollar, that's a pretty good deal. But sometimes these imbalances are too big, right? They're not just minor fluctuations that the market can take care of. And so now we're talking on the macro scale. And so what incentives can we have in place in order to make these kind of order of magnitude kind of shifts to put these two back in equilibrium? And so this is done through effectively changing the interest rate on the loans. So if you lower the interest rate on the loans, right, it's going to be more attractive to borrow DAI, right? So you're going to incentivize supply expansion. If you raise interest rates on the loan, right, it's going to be less attractive to have an open loan or to take out more loans, right? And so the supply will contract. And so this is how you can do kind of macro changes to get step function returns back to the peg. So this actually was a proposal that executed this morning, and it lowered the interest rate from 20.5% to 18.5%. And governance effectively did that because we were seeing kind of sustained prices of $1.01 for the past 7 to 10 days. So these are the kind of mechanisms that we have. Now, have you ever heard of the phrase "speak softly but carry a big stick"? Emergency shutdown is the big stick. So emergency shutdown is essentially you push a button and every single loan gets settled. And effectively every single DAI now can be redeemed for the underlying collateral. And so what's important about this is that, let's say the market is trading DAI at, $1.20. So the market is trading DAI at 80 cents, something ridiculous like that. Emergency shutdown will ensure that every person holding a DAI will get back $1 worth of collateral. And so if you think about this event doesn't actually need to happen for it to have an effect on markets. So just the threat of this being possible should stop a trader from ever wanting to buy DAI, at $1.20, at $1.25, God forbid, at $1.50, knowing that when DAI has reached those levels, an emergency shutdown is very likely, and they're going to lose their shirt. Right? Similarly, the same thing works in reverse, where why would you ever want to sell your DAI, at 80 cents or 70 cents, right, when global settlement is imminent, and now you get your dollar. So one of the kind of the big criticisms that DAI usually gets is that it's not redeemable, right? It's not like a USDC or a true USD, right, where you can redeem it for dollars and people kind of intuitively understand, oh, well, that's why it's worth $1 because I can redeem it for $1. DAI has those same guarantees, but the redeemability only comes during global settlement. Okay, so kind of what's the problem here, right? The DAI peg is kind of been doing all right. What is the issue here? Well, the big issue here is that we only have one lever to kind of pull when we're trying to act like a central bank to ensure this peg, and that is, trying to regulate the supply, right, through changing the interest rate, right? If we lower the interest rate or we raise the interest rate, right, to incentivize changes in supply, but we don't really have a way to spur demand. And so that's where what we call the DAI savings rate comes in. And so this is going to be the prime feature of multi-collateral DAI. And people seem to be all excited about, oh, I want to use this token as collateral in multi-collateral DAI, or I want to use this other token. Like, this is much, much, much more important than new collateral types, because this kind of changes everything. What the DAI savings rate is anyone with DAI can effectively just lock up their DAI in a smart contract and start earning interest. So now, you have this lever for changing demand, right? If I tell you that a DAI is going to return 1% interest a year, you may kind of shrug your shoulders and be like, okay. But now if I tell you that DAI is going to return 7% interest per year, all of a sudden, you're probably very interested. Right? So this is another way that we're going to reinforce the peg, but it doesn't just have benefits of reinforcing the peg, it has so many kind of compounding benefits as well, right? Because it increases the fundamental utility of DAI, right? If DAI is actually not just a store of value, but a way for you to increase your principal, right? That's a very attractive value proposition. Now, a lot of people are going to be interested in DAI that weren't interested in DAI before. Additionally, it opens up a whole host of new business models, right? So in crypto, we talk a lot about, how do we monetize this, right? And the answer during the ICO boom was, oh, we're going to have a token, and this shitcoin is going to do something, right? And people were excited because, right, they thought they've unlocked this secret to monetizing open source, right? Tokens were the answer. But I think the DAI savings rate offers another solution. So if you're an exchange and users are depositing DAI onto your exchange, wouldn't you feel pretty good about listing DAI if you can just lock up that DAI, your users basically DAI deposits, and start earning interest off that? If you're a wallet, right? A lot of wallets have been kind of struggling to monetize. Well, what if your users are basically depositing DAI into your wallet? Wouldn't you want to have kind of prime placement for DAI and feature DAI as your kind of exclusive stablecoin if the wallet owner can effectively lock up their users' DAI and start earning interest, right? So it unlocks this whole new class of applications to start monetizing themselves, and it's basically going to be a growth hack for getting DAI into every single facet of the ecosystem. Okay, so maybe none of that was new, but now let's talk about something new. So, synthetic assets, I think, are the coolest things in sliced bread. Effectively, synthetic assets are just stable coins. So I don't want your eyes to glaze over like, oh, what is this like new thing? Like, no, there's nothing new here. They're just stable coins. They're just like DAI, but instead of being pegged to the dollar, they're pegged to something else. So effectively what we've done here, right, is you have this system, right, that we've created with DAI, with CDPs and DAI, right, where we've created this set of incentives to keep DAI stable around $1. Well, if you just change the reference that you're using, you can create a token that's stable to anything, right? So you can have, Euro DAI, you can have Yen DAI, you can have a DAI that's pegged to the price of Amazon stock, of Tesla stock. You can have a DAI that's pegged to the number of Starbucks franchises in the world. You can have a DAI that tracks the S&P 500. You can have a DAI that tracks, anything, really. And so now, these same kind of benefits that people were seeing, potential in from tokens, right? Oh, well, instead of being kind of regionalized or localized markets, right now you have these global kind of super liquid markets. Well, with synthetic assets, you have all of those benefits, right? You're allowing anyone in the world to have this universal access to exposure to almost any asset class that they want. So, how does this work? So, I told you before, so here's a normal CDP, right? This is how DAI works right now, right? You lock up some ETH into the CDP, right? And you get out DAI. You lock up something volatile, and you get out something stable. With synthetic assets, we just kind of turn this on its head. It's the same exact system. There is nothing new you need to do. You just lock up DAI into your CDP, and you get out a synthetic asset. You lock up something stable, and you get out something volatile. And so these are very complementary, because let me show you something. So the regular CDP mechanism is a way for gaining long exposure to an asset, right? If you're borrowing against Ethereum, you're going long on Ethereum. Right, I can lock up some Ethereum, I can borrow some DAI, I can use that DAI to buy more Ethereum. I now have more DAI than I started out with. I have leveraged exposure to to ETH, and I'm long ETH. But if you look at the synthetic CDP, it's complementary in the fact that it's a mechanism for shorting, right? So I can lock up some DAI, and I can borrow ETH, and I can sell that ETH for a DAI, and now I have more DAI, right? I can lock that in the CDP again, right? Borrow more ETH, sell that ETH, right? So this is a mechanism for shorting. So how does this kind of all play together? Well, I talked earlier about the DAI savings rate being amazing because it allows us to kind of generate DAI demand, right? Demand for holding DAI. Let me kind of take a tangent really quick and say why that's important. Because right now, in the way the system is right now, where is the equilibrium point? The equilibrium point right now is apparently we need 18.5% interest for borrowing because there's such an imbalance of so many more people wanting to borrow DAI than there are people wanting to hold DAI. So if we can simulate DAI demand, right, then borrowing costs don't have to be as high. And so synthetic assets on top of the DAI savings rate are another way to stimulate demand. So the demand for shorting is going to stimulate DAI demand. Because what do you need to short? You need DAI. You need to hold DAI, you need to lock up DAI. So if a normal CDP is the demand for going long, synthetic CDP is the demand for going short. And so synthetic assets are going to enable this demand for shorting to actually drive DAI demand. And if you can drive DAI demand, then you can lower borrowing costs, and you're going to have this super happy medium between lower borrowing costs and lower lending costs. Okay, so that's kind of it for me. But you should all check out the links I have up here. We have super active subreddit. We have super active Twitter. You can go on Rocket Chat. Every single Maker employee is in there. You can all ask us any questions. We have a forum where we discuss, where we kind of discuss all of the governance proposals. So, people are debating, what types of collateral should be added, what new features should I be looking at, what integrations, right? All super, super active. So if any of this interests you, take a picture of this. We're also hiring like crazy. So we're at about 100-something people right now, and we have, I think, over a dozen open positions right now across all kinds of discipline. So any type of engineer, marketing, or even looking at kind of traders, hit us up.
Right. Thank you so much, Nicholas. Any questions for Nicholas? We have time for 2 questions. Okay, 2 gentlemen, 1 there and 1 there. Just a second.
Apologies if I missed this. What is the timeline like on synthetic? Well, first, what's the timeline on multi-collateral DAI? And then what's the timeline like on synthetic assets?
Okay, I'm going to spare you from our stereotypical coming soon answer, and I'll give the slightly vague but less vague before the end of the year for MCD. Definitely before the end of the year. Synthetic assets, probably not at the very earliest, late 2019, very, very earliest. Right? It's not really about the technology, but kind of what assets, right, do people want in terms of synthetic assets, right? So ETH is a very obvious one, right? People want to short ETH. Right? Bitcoin is probably a very obvious one. People want to be able to short Bitcoin, right, or be able to buy a Bitcoin on the ETH chain. Right? That would do huge things for Binance, for kind of DeFi. But other assets, it's not clear if the market is there for them, if there's going to be the liquidity there for them. So there's a very large research component that has to go into this first.
Hi, what do you think are the long-term implications of the DAI savings rate on the traditional banking sector, especially commercial banks? So if you can get, let's say 4 to 7% on DAI, and I can only get 0% or in Europe -% on my savings account, I mean, it seems like the logical next step would people would abandon their bank accounts, but that has huge implications. So what do you see as the implications and consequences for the traditional banking sector? Thanks.
I think we kind of get ahead of ourselves sometimes. I agree with you to an extent, but sometimes we have to realize that we're actually quite small. We're a very vocal minority, but things don't move that fast, right? People with giant sums of money are not thinking in that terms of risky mindset, right? If you get interest at a bank, right, that bank is insured, right, you kind of trust this. So you can essentially think, right, from a consumer kind of perspective, you think of it as risk-free. DAI is not risk-free. We try to risk minimize it, right? But it runs on Ethereum, and Ethereum, could get attacked by miners, right? It could have some kind of exploit in it. It runs on top of the Maker system, right? Which could have, say a bug in it, right? Or it could get hacked in some manner, right? So there's these compounding types of risks that are not insignificant, right? I don't think they're overwhelming, but they're not insignificant. And I think it's going to take a lot of time to kind of prove, right? To build up a reputation, to instill a sense of trust that these systems work, right? And that the risk can be calculated. And as soon as you can calculate the risk, right, then it's just a math equation, right? Then, well, if the bank is offering me this and DSR is this, I'll go with DSR. But if DSR drops a little bit below here, I'll go back to the bank, right? It's just going to be bouncing around. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Nicholas. And we'd like to invite straight away, there will be no break. Now it's going to be an overview of the Compound protocol. And that's Calvin Leal from Compound, so it's strategy.